We are delighted to welcome you to Session 1, God and Turmoil. The session will be moderated by Steve Porter, Professor of Spiritual Formation and Theology at Biola University. Our guest panelists are Mimi Dixon, retired Senior Pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Golden and member of the Renovaré Board of Directors, and Chris Hall, Scholar of Ancient Christianity and President of Renovaré.
So Mimi Dixon and Chris Hall, thank you for joining this conversation as we reflect on where has God been in our lives throughout this strange, difficult, tragic season of life called COVID-19. So thank you for joining this conversation. I want to start by just framing our time together with really three thoughts about how the Christian spiritual tradition thinks about suffering and trial. And the first one is just that we're realists about pain and evil in the world. As Isaiah says, don't call good evil and evil good. We know that something has gone horribly wrong in the world, that this is not the way God intended things to be, that the very good of his original creation has been distorted, and we live downstream of that fallen condition. So we're realists about that. We weep with those who weep. We rejoice with those who rejoice. The second thing that the Christian tradition frames suffering and evil with is that the first move is always to move towards those who are suffering, towards those who are in pain, towards those who are grieving. And I can't help but think here of Jesus' teaching of the Good Samaritan, where the Good Samaritan goes to the man who has been beaten, the man who's been robbed. And so that the Christian tradition is first and foremost a tradition of love, where we reach out to those in need. And then third, and this is really where we're going, is there's also this long tradition of reflecting on trials, of seeing the circumstances of our lives, particularly the disruptive circumstances of our lives, the circumstances that bring pain and disorientation, of seeing those as trying or proving, testing our faith. In fact, I was looking at the Greek word that's translated trial in James 1, that by the trials your faith is proved, and that another translation of that word trial is experiment. That these are experiments. And I was thinking that's interesting. It's not that through suffering or pain or loss or disruption or COVID-19 that God is experimenting with us, but it is a bit of an experiment. It is a bit of an experiment of our faith life, our life with God. And we see really what is the true condition of our life of faith. I love Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of James 1, 2 through 4. Peterson writes in the message, "Consider it a sheer gift, friends, when tests and challenges come at you from all sides. You know that under pressure, your faith life, your life of faith, is forced into the open, and it shows its true colors. So don't try to get out of anything prematurely. Let it do its work so you become mature and well-developed, not deficient in any way." And yet, as we do reemerge from this involuntary discipline of lockdown and pandemic conditions and anxiety and fear, I do find a temptation within myself to try to get out of things prematurely. I want to get out of this time and move on and get back to normal. And so thank you for helping us stop and pause and reflect on, in this case, on where has God been in this, and where have we been in our relationship with God? And that's really my first question for both of you. And Mimi, if you want to answer first, and then Chris, you can go. But when it comes to your own communion with God, how has COVID been? How has the COVID conditions been for you in testing or trying? Some people speak of kind of a great opportunity in these times. For others, it's been very challenging. Mimi, what's it been like for you? And then Chris.
Well, thank you, Steve, for the way that you framed our conversation. I think that was really aimed at the center of what I have heard people experience and what has been my own experience. My friend Larry Crabb, who's now with the Lord, used to say that this is a narrow journey. And my experience has been that it is a narrow journey that narrows as we go along. It squeezes us more and more. And we see that reflected in the teaching of Teresa of Avila in the Interior Castle, that as we move deeper, our self-knowledge is brought to the surface. It's extruded, it's pressed, as in the translation of Peterson that you just read. We are pressed and what's inside becomes visible. There is the long Christian tradition has helped us understand that there is great opportunity and gift in that I'm now aware of what is filling my interior self. And I have the opportunity, when I'm squeezed and things emerge, to notice what attitudes, what coping patterns become revealed, the way that I tend to respond to stress or try to regain control. And the invitation instead is to turn from those very tempting and very, there's a lot of gravity in those vices, to turn and embrace the opposite virtue. So one way that I have thought about it, Steve, is that we're in a world of toddlers and there's an adult in the room. And so my invitation at those moments when I'm distressed by what I see around me, and a lot of things were extruded individually, in groups, in churches, in our country, in politics. During this time, a lot of things that have been there for a long time were extruded and became visible. And we have an opportunity at that time, which was my experience, to stop, pay attention, notice, slow down, and see what was happening and where the Lord is present in it, and what might be my personal invitation. And in many ways, it was to pray and to begin praying in an Ephesians 6 manner, praying against the principalities and powers that are behind what is visible, the ways that we try to control, the ways we attempt to dominate, the ways that we attempt to get back to normal, whatever that is. I'm not very interested in normal. There's one last thing that I would share. If we think about a pyramid, and when everything is stable, it's predictable, it's down on its flat side. The pandemic tipped everybody up on a corner. And when we're up on an edge like that, it's extremely uncomfortable. What we want to do is either return or go forward, slam down to the next place of normalcy. And if we can stay in that pointy place, in that extruding place, pay attention, be open to what God is doing, it's been my experience, it can be very, very transformative.
Yeah, thanks, Mimi. Chris, how about you?
So when we moved into this time, the question I sensed the Lord was asking of me was something like this, Steve. Chris, are you going to be attentive to what I'm going to offer you? Are you going to be attentive to what I'm going to offer? Now, as Mimi knows, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, which means I have a self-indulgent personality and I don't like to suffer. I don't like pain. Avoid pain at all costs. So what was the Lord asking when he said, are you going to be attentive? We could add another word, I think, and accepting of what I'm going to offer to you. And I said, well, I hope, if it doesn't hurt too bad. And so what happened to me over the course of those 15 months is the pace of my life slowed significantly down. So time slowed down. Probably true for lots of folks who are listening in. Time slowed down. Just the pace of a day slowed down. And on a good day, I was able, on a good day, to attend in a way that probably because of the pace of my life before, I had not been attentive to what the Lord was offering me. You know, God hasn't changed one whit. God didn't change one whit during our COVID time. Some of us did change. Some of us resisted change. I don't see in the future that things are going to be uh, substantially or remarkably better. I don't think this is probably the last of the pandemics we'll see. The world is an extremely volatile place. It's an uncertain place. It's very complex. So I think that for all of us, to move away from me for just a moment, for all of us, the Lord not only offered this time, He'll be offering other times when He'll invite us to move into Jesus in a manner that some might be a little bit strange for evangelicals. Uh, uh, and I think the invitation will be a willingness to enter into Jesus's suffering in a way that will be cleansing for us. Technical word, purgative for us. But in the in the long run, and sometimes in the short run, that can be a very good thing.
Thank you both. I mean, there's so much to reflect on there. It's striking to me that for both of you, in the middle or in the midst of those early days, it sounds like you turned to prayer. Mimi, you were turning to prayer of the principalities and the powers that were at work. Chris, you were turning to prayer and saying, God, what do you want to do in me during this time? And
Yeah, what are you offering?
what are you offering? And I think my confession is I'm a bit surprised by how long it took me to pray. I was so shocked that the scientists weren't going to solve this problem
Okay.
in a matter of weeks. And I think of living in this modern world where, and again, this connects a bit to what you were talking about, Chris, of how comfortable we are and how we avoid pain and suffering. So here's the question. C.S. Lewis has this great quote in his book, The Problem of Pain, where he talks about how suffering can put us in this place of deeper dependence, deeper vulnerability, deeper neediness. But then when that threat goes away, when things do go back to normal, or at least the threat isn't as strong, I'm vaccinated now, I don't need to worry, that how quickly our nature, Lewis says, leaps back to our toys. We kind of leap back to our former manner of life. And I saw a news story about a Cubs baseball game, and people are just back in action doing their old things. So here's a question: what practices would you recommend to stay in that posture of prayer, of receptivity, of openness to God? What are you offering now? What are you offering now? How do we stay with this and avoid the temptation, as Eugene Peterson has it in James 1, that we try to get out of things prematurely. We don't let it do its work. So how can we linger in this COVID time, but not be masochistic about it? We don't want to certainly glory in it, but we want to be open to it. What would you recommend to people? And Chris, why don't you take that one first?
I think it asks the question: what is the normality that I learned during COVID that might have been a helpful one, a new normal? And what is the abnormality that my previous life was offering to me and I didn't notice? I didn't notice. I was thinking about a song that Carolyn Ahrens has recently written, our director of education at Renovaré. I think I rightfully call her the Amy Grant of Canada. In fact, she and Amy just did a song together on Carolyn's album. And in this song, she talks about the call to be maladjusted to a world gone mad. That's a good line, isn't it? To be maladjusted to a world gone mad. I think this ties in with what Mimi was talking about, praying against powers and principalities that would convince us, oh no, it's past now. Oh, that's past. Welcome back. Welcome back. And at that point, I think the first step is, why would I want to step back into an aspect probably of my life that was not all that healthy when I've been able to have a good shower, if I can put it that way? Why would I want to adopt a more insane way of living when I perhaps have learned a sane way of living? Well, the reason why is habits run deep.
Mm.
Habits run deep. Perspectives run deep. Um, the Lord provided us with a learning space, Steve. He provided us with a learning space, a purposeful slowing, and for many people, not only a slowing, but a suffering. Some people lost family members, not a few. Many lost family members. Many were sick themselves. Just the experience of the stress involved in living during this time. So once it passes, I don't blame somebody for going to a Cubs game. I don't blame them. I'm a baseball fan. I don't blame them. But I wouldn't want uh, the reality offered to me by the fun I enjoy at a baseball game to become the reality I choose to move back into for the core of meaning in my life. So I would say, what do you do? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Identify 3 or 4 gifts that the Lord offered, uh, and though the time we will have to sink deep into whatever gifts they are and whatever disciplines, spiritual disciplines, are necessary to move deeply into the gifting, um, 5 minutes rather than maybe an hour as we move back into a normal pace of life.
Mhm.
Small, I can hear Eugene Peterson at this point, small, consistent steps toward maintaining the perspective we learned that was new, maybe,
Mhm.
or maintaining the cleansing that was new.
Mm.
I had a friend, Steve, you know this name, Tom Oden.
Mm.
And what Tom said to me, he probably saw something in my character that needed remedy. And so he said a long time ago, it had to be in 1987 or so, as I was getting to know him in my doctoral work. He said, Chris, a healthy spiritual life without some form of ascesis is impossible. Now, for folks who are listening in, if the word ascesis is a little bit foreign, you might be familiar with the word asceticism. It's got kind of a bad rep, I think, in our modern day. It comes from a Greek verb, askeo, means to exercise. To exercise. So a Greek athlete had a certain regimen and so on. And sometimes a Greek athlete who was, say, going to be a runner would engage in practices that seemed entirely unrelated toward running itself, and yet were necessary. So for folks listening in, you might ask yourself, what did the Lord offer me? What are the small 5-minute steps, maybe, or depending on one's day, that I can, during that time, continue whatever was the good thing that started? Ask continually, ask continually the question, why would I want to go back to adjusting myself to a world gone mad? Maladjustment at that point might be the sanest thing to do. And then pray for lots and lots of grace to enable us to live in a different way.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Mimi, what would you add to that?
I like so much of what you said, Chris. I think that's exactly right. What started to happen in me in this time of seclusion that I want to hang on to and I want to carry it forward? And what are the things that were pruned off? Do I really want to get out the super glue and try to glue all of that back on? I'm not really interested in that. I am very interested in seeing what's been pruned away. And I really like what you said earlier, Steve, that this wasn't just a couple of weeks. It wasn't as long as a month, but it went on and on and on. And at first, those of us who were able to hold our breath felt like we were doing pretty well. But then as it went on, things began to become exposed, attitudes, as I said, coping patterns. For me, the invitation that I had that came to me in such a real way during COVID is to say, what if I just wanted to spend some time with you? I miss you. Let's spend some time together when you're not busy working for me, but you're just with me. And I found that as the hours expanded, that sense of the presence of Jesus here in my home became palatable. It became concrete. And I had a deep sense that the Lord was inviting me to say, let's look together at what's happening. Let's listen together to what people are saying. Let's pay attention. And so my primary feeling is I realized that I began to see things in a different way, reframing what I was experiencing. It was really helpful. I like what you said, Chris, about a learning space. My favorite period in Christian history is the desert fathers and mothers. And they moved very intentionally, they moved themselves physically to a space where they could be before the Lord and listen and learn. So for all of us, this has been a learning space. And I think that an Abba or an Amma would sit with a disciple and would ask the question, what happened to you?
Mm.
What happened to you? What was revealed in you? What made you afraid? What gave you hope? And as we move back again into a period of involvement, what do we carry with us?
Mm.
Was so valuable, those treasures that were mined from the very depths of our experience. How are we going to be different?
Mhm.
So that's what's staying with me, and I really appreciate what both of you have said.
I want to tie it up, maybe, Steve, from our end. Um, if I can speak on Mimi's behalf, on our end, we're not saying that this does not hurt. We're not saying that grief is not terribly, terribly disorienting. The pandemic was disorienting. Grief is particularly disorienting. Everything looks different. It's like a mountain range, and one of the mountains is missing that was there 5 minutes ago. What we are saying, though, is that the possibility of entering into a way of responding and being molded and shaped by what's occurred is often offered to us. I lost my best friend on July 6, 2019, and I still miss him terribly. It's been a series of losses for me, but that was a huge one. And it was so disorienting, and it remains disorienting. I just want to grab the phone and call him up. How are you doing? What are you up to? Let's go play golf.
Mm.
But the mountain's not there anymore. But the wonder of what Mimi and I are talking about is we've been promised. We've been promised the mountain range will be restored. The land will shift, and it will be more beautiful than you could ever imagine. That's hope. That's hope. So what do we do in a pandemic? We love, we have compassion, we sink our roots into hope, and we lengthen our faith,
Mm.
deepen it by God's grace.